Joining us live from Canberra now for his reaction is the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Angus, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So you've had a bit more time now to process the budget. Is it enough to ease the pinch for households?
Well, it's clearly not going to do that. I mean, that was the test for Labor. Were they going to take the strength of the economy and the strengthening budget position we've seen and deal with the challenges Australians are facing? Top of that list is cost of living, Pete, and the budget failed the test. Typical Australian family will be $2,000 worse off by Christmas, and there's absolutely nothing in this budget to help them. The question I guess I'm starting to ask the morning after the budget is, what was the point? This is the first budget since Federation where they've redone a previous budget. It's full of doom, gloom, commentary and forecasting, but no plan. And what we needed was a coherent plan, a clear plan for dealing with those pressures Australians are facing. There's certainly not that in there. There's a lot of broken election promises, I have to say, and the two most obvious ones that they've given up on their $275 electricity price reduction. They've just swept that away. And they've given up on delivering real wage improvements in this election cycle. Real wages going backwards in this election cycle. That's incredibly disappointing for Australians. You know, Jim Chalmers, I guess the question you've got to ask is, why did he do this? It's just a vanity project. What was the point? Was
it responsible, though, to just bank the extra money that we're receiving from resources?
Well, he hasn't done that. I mean, he's got an extra $142 billion of taxation since the March budget coming out over the forwards. So $142 billion over the next 4 years. He's spending $115 billion of that. The vast majority of that windfall is being spent. And worse than that, you actually see the budget deficit worsening over the next 3 years, over this election cycle. He's making it worse. So, the idea that this was responsible, spending an extra $115 billion since the March budget, and given that the economic situation has improved since then, is just remarkable. I mean, this budget is not an answer to anything. It's not dealing with either the symptoms of the cost of living pressures or the source. And that's what's so disappointing about it. There is no plan here to speak of. And there's a real question about why the budget was even held at a time when it's not normally held.
Sure. I mean, but to be fair, one of those sources is the war in Ukraine, which can't really do much about that. I mean, you'd be copying that if you were in government now. But on to energy prices. I've just got to move on, Angus, here, just short of time. But energy prices, they're going to spike next year and beyond. How should the government help folks in the short term?
Well, first of all, they should keep their election commitments. I mean, that's the first point. If you say to the Australian people, no asterisks, no footnotes, we're going to deliver a $275 electricity price reduction, you should deliver it. Now, I've said for quite some time, the best way to deliver is get more supply into the market. Chris Bowen shows no interest in that.
There's no problem with supply, though, is there? I mean, the problem is that most of it goes overseas.
Well, you've got to get more. There's two parts to this. You've got to get more gas supply into the domestic gas network, and you've got to get more dispatchable electricity generation in place. I don't see anything from Labor that's going to achieve either of those things. So the situation will get worse, and Australians will pay the price. If the government can't manage its own affairs, then households have to do it for them. And sadly, that's where it's going.
Well, if, as you say, households are looking at another $2,000 a year for their energy bills, would you support a UK-style subsidy?
Well, I haven't seen any proposal. You don't need to subsidise if you get your policies right. That's the point. We saw an 8% reduction in electricity prices in recent years for Australian households, and that was all about just getting more supply into the market. Labor's not interested in that. They've got all sorts of, Chris Bowen's got all sorts of other goals he's trying to achieve. You just got to get focused back on the interests of Australian households and Australian businesses. That is the overwhelming point here.
If they were to pitch that now, though,
there's no sign of that in this budget.
If they were to pitch that now, though, a subsidy system, and bearing in mind that was massive cost blowouts that the UK would have faced, is that something that you would be open to, or do you think because of that we shouldn't go down that road because it would just add to inflationary pressures?
Well, I've said what I think the answer is. I mean, obviously, you don't want to subsidise because it costs taxpayers money. That's the point. And so the best way to achieve a solution is to just get more supply into the markets that count. And it's doable. We did it. I mean, we saw exactly that happen. Now, Labor doesn't seem to be showing any interest in this. But look, the broader point here is we've got a series of broken promises, real wages going backwards. I mean, this is something Labor made a real deal about during the election campaign, but nothing.
Okay, just one more. Just one more on gas, though. What about an increased windfall tax for gas companies?
Well, I don't know how that's going to help. I mean, look, you know, we'll see how much tax these companies pay. By the way, they're all tend to be on long-term contracts, so it's not as though the profits go up immediately as international prices go up. But the broader point here is if you want to get prices down, get more supply, and this is economics 101. It's the first thing you're taught if you go and do some economics. Okay. And Labor just can't seem to get its head around it.
Okay, just back to wages, Angus. The Chamber of Commerce was on the program last hour. It's got major concerns about workplace relations. It believes businesses will get dragged into deals that they don't want. Do you share those concerns as well?
Oh, I do, very much so. I mean, in the very week we've got this budget being handed down, which is more really just forecasts and commentary. We're also getting an industrial relations bill that risks sending us into a toxic industrial relations environment like we saw back during the 70s and 80s. And that's exactly what we don't need. If you want more inflationary pressures, go down that path. That's what's being proposed by Labor, industry-wide bargaining. We're deeply concerned about whether this will send us into a price-wage spiral. We all want to see higher real wages, but a race between prices and wages never ends well, Pete, and that's exactly what we don't want to see.
OK, and just a final one here on the NDIS. Out of control spending there. Your government couldn't fix it either. How urgent are major cuts there?
Well, can I say we contained the growth in spending? I mean, the economy grew faster than the growth in spending in the lead up to the pandemic, from 2013 through to the pandemic. NDIS was one of the real pressures we faced. There's no question about that. It is a real pressure, I accept that. But you've got to work with it. We'll work with Labor on making sure the NDIS is sustainable. We have to make sure it's sustainable. It's too important.
That means cuts, though, right? Sustainable means cuts.
And that's something we're more than happy to work with Labor on.
Making it sustainable, though, would mean heavy cuts, because at the moment the forecast, you're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars over 10 plus years.
One thing that's the one thing that's very clear, Pete, is there won't be cuts to the end. I mean, it's growing fast, and so the question is how to make sure that growth is sustainable. And as I say, we're more than happy to work with Labor on that. But the broader point here is one of the hard bits of government is managing your overall spending. There will be fast-growing areas and areas not so fast. In aggregate, you've got to make sure that your economy is growing faster than your spending. And that way you're seeing continual improvement in the budget situation. We've done it. We've proven it can be done, even though there's these pressures, and that's what Labor needs to do.
That is the Shadow Treasurer, Angus Taylor. Angus, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.